Hello and welcome back to another episode of Raw and Real with Stefanie Fernandes. I'm Stefanie, your podcast host. I'm a rapid transformational therapist and founder of Your Freedom program. I work with women who want to return to themselves on their healing journey. In this podcast, we give the stage to women who overcame trauma, adversity, or any other difficult phase in their life. Be ready to get raw emotions from real people. The stories we share here are to inspire women just like you that anything is possible. In today's episode, we will be talking about infertility. Infertility is defined as not being able to get pregnant despite having frequent unprotected sex for at least a year for most couples. Infertility may result from an issue with either you or your partner, or a combination of factors that prevent pregnancy. About 9% of men and 11% of women of reproductive age have experienced fertility problems. One of them is today's guest, Caryn Rich. After spending 8 years going through double-digit ART cycles, 5 miscarriages, and the loss of one of her twins, Caryn was able to fulfill her dream of completing her family. And I'm so happy to welcome her today. Hi, Caryn. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, Stefanie. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it so much.
So now you're a fertility coach who helps women that are stuck in secondary infertility, miscarriage and IVF failure, and to help them really to take the next step in their infertility journey. So I would really like to hear your story today and how you help women. Please tell us your story.
Absolutely. So I myself have, as you mentioned, a very long history with infertility. I like to call myself like an original gangster when it comes to infertility because I've been in this space since 2005, a very long time. And I've seen so much change and happen in that time. So I myself suffer from endometriosis. And when I got my diagnosis in my early 20s, was told that I could perhaps have trouble getting pregnant. But at the time, didn't really think much about it. And fast forward when I finally, found a partner, and I got married and settled down, he was not ready to start trying as quickly as I was. So by the time we started trying, I was over 30, but it was about 9 months of unprotected sex, and I knew that coupled with my endometriosis diagnosis warranted a visit to the doctor. So we went. She recommended we see a specialist, and we did our first round of IVF. We got pregnant, and it was wonderful. And as scary as it was nothing like what was to come when we were trying for baby number 2. For baby number 2, it took us 5 years, 5 miscarriages, and the loss of, one of my twins. And it was just such a rocky road. Back then, I think it was a little bit better than now because there was no portal. You were having a lot more personal conversation with your practitioners. You had more FaceTime with them. But it was still hard. It was still really hard because they didn't know why I wasn't having success. And it was very hard. I eventually, I am that person who is not going to take no for an answer. And unexplained infertility was not something that I was going to take because what we did for the first baby wasn't working. And it was this long journey because there's not a lot of help, for women when you don't fit inside that box of, traditional, cycles and things like that. So I did so much research and trial and error, and it was hard, but we went on to get pregnant with twins. And I was so happy to do that. And, unfortunately, I lost one of the twins because my twins were born very early and the other spent 135 days in the NICU. And it was a really, really tough time for me because I felt robbed having to go through everything we went through. We nearly went bankrupt with, going through 16 cycles till that point. It's really expensive. And it was really tough. But when my daughter turned 2, we found out we were pregnant naturally. And I was in my early 40s. And I had one fallopian tube because one of my miscarriages was ectopic. So not only had I gone on to, overcome infertility, but I also, fixed my body somehow. We didn't think that that was possible. So, my youngest child, was a natural pregnancy after all of that. So, and that was very cleansing and healing for me because, as I said, I felt like my pregnancy was robbed from me because they were born, so early. They were 6 months. I was only 6 months pregnant when they were born. And, the chance of survival was less than 5%. And my daughter made it. My son didn't. It wasn't until, after all of this, I just had something sitting on my heart, and I stopped and I flipped the script and I said, this happened for me, not to me. And my mission, my purpose is to help others get through it quicker and easier than I did. Mm-hmm. And to just provide that hope, because my story, while bittersweet, is more hope than anything else, because I did it. I overcame infertility and then went on to heal my body. And it's so hard when you're in it.
Yeah. What was the hardest?
Just picking up and doing it again and again and again and again, because, and even when you get pregnant after all of that time, that's not the end of it, because then you worry. You worry every single time you go to the bathroom that, God forbid, you're going to see blood. Mm-hmm. It's just the whole thing. I worried my entire pregnancy because, I had given birth so early. Even with my natural pregnancy, I was a mess. I mean, it's so anxiety ridden. There was a lot of PTSD that, even when my last daughter was born, she wound up in the NICU for something completely different, but I kept calling her my daughter's name. The other daughter, who was born, prematurely, this daughter was not premature. It's just, there's a lot of heavy emotions. And, until recently and Instagram, there was no platform, there was no support by the way that we have now. To normalize the whole conversation. So that's what I do. And my biggest thing that I like to help women do is from more of a holistic HOLE, sorry, not HOLE, but, a holistic approach, but not necessarily, I want to look at the mental, the physical, and the emotional, and the medical, I want to look at that all together. Most coaches, I think, only work on, the emotions, but I'm an action taker, and that's my jam, because I can look at what you've done and, almost like a forensic, person, I can figure out what's missing and what you need to do that will give you better success rates on your next cycle.
Yeah, so really like a detective.
Yes.
I can imagine that when you go through the cycles of IVF treatment, and you did many of them, some are not successful, but do you have time in between cycles to rebalance, to recollect yourself of what just happened? Or how did you experience that for yourself and in your partnership with your husband? And then you had a child to take care of in addition. So how was that for you?
Those are such great questions. So amazing. So, to answer the first question, I thought that if I just kept doing cycle after cycle, that would be good. And ultimately, that's something I discourage my clients from doing today, because you do need that time. Your body needs that time because you are, filling it up with so many hormones. It needs time, but you need time emotionally. And then you also need time to talk to your doctor to figure out a strategy based on what just happened so that you don't repeat the same mistakes, right? So that was really hard. My husband and I were on very different pages for so many reasons. We just brought to our marriage a lot of wrong ways of coping. And we, you know, I felt, like we were in opposition. And I also felt like I did not honor the way that he was going through what we were going through. I felt that because I was the one who was doing the medication and experiencing the losses, that it didn't affect him. It did, but it affected him in a different way. And then I would get angry when he didn't react. So again, that's something that I work on wholeheartedly with the couples that I see today, because you know what? At the end of the day, your partner can be your biggest advocate or your biggest stressor. And we want it to be the biggest advocate. So I learned so much, from that piece. And it was hard. It was really hard having, when we started this process, he had just turned 1. He was still really little. We were going into New York City at the time, and we lived on the outskirts in New Jersey. And I had this terrible guilt. I was waking him up at like 4 o'clock in the morning so that we could get into the city to get monitoring done, because you usually have to be there between 7 and 9 for blood work and ultrasound. And then I had to drive my husband to the city, who was, working in the city. It was a lot. It was a lot. It was a lot. So, but I learned so much from that I bring to my coaching today.
What was the biggest takeaway?
I think the biggest takeaway really was that at the end of the day, it is better to take time and to regroup. It's really important to make time for your relationship, that your relationship is paramount to everything else. And you need to have date nights, and you cannot live and breathe infertility, that there has to be a happy medium. You need to still connect with the children you have. You need to connect with your partner. You need to connect with your friends, the ones who are supportive, because I am also an advocate of, surrounding yourself with positivity. And sometimes that's hard with some friends who perhaps might not understand. But overall, you cannot make this process the center of attention for everything. And it wants to be the center of attention for everything. So that was my biggest takeaway.
And when you remember back, you said, your partner can be your biggest supporter. What else helped you, and who were your supporters? There's a lot of hesitation from us women to share that we are pregnant before we hit the 12-week mark. Mm-hmm. But this is where there's a highest risk of losing the baby, and where we need the most support. Like when I was pregnant with my boys, it was so hard not to share that, because there's so much anxiety and happiness at the same time that I've never experienced that before. And all of a sudden I should just be all quiet, keep it all to myself. And I had an uncomplicated pregnancy and conceived naturally. So I can just imagine how difficult it is when you go doing all this monitoring, blood work on a regular basis, and worrying, will this stay? Will this baby stay this time? Who were your supporters, and how did you deal with that?
I didn't have a lot of supporters. I didn't feel very supported by my husband, but as I mentioned, I think some of that was just both of us together. I had a therapist, really. That is the only person that, had I not had her, I think I kind of would have gone crazy. I did have a sister-in-law who went through infertility, who I would talk to. And I did have one friend who also went through multiple miscarriages, who I met later on in the process, who was somewhat of support for me, but it was hard. There wasn't, it was a stigma. I did not want to talk to everybody about it. The couple of friends that I did talk to about me going through infertility treatments, two of them wound up getting pregnant and throwing it in my face, kind of, I'm sure that they didn't feel that it was that way, but, so there wasn't a lot of support like there is today. And, it was stigma, and I was very embarrassed. I did not talk about my fertility treatment and my losses until, until I really started doing this. I didn't talk about it publicly. People would literally ask me to my face, "Are you going through infertility treatments?" And I would lie because it was so embarrassing to me. It hurt.
What was so embarrassing, would you say, in hindsight?
Because my body couldn't do what everybody else's could. And it was embarrassing. It was really embarrassing, and it was super stressful. And, from a financial perspective, it was very stressful in my marriage. And, to illustrate how my husband and I dealt with things differently, I think I was on my third miscarriage, and I needed my husband. I had just gotten, a phone call from the doctor. I'd gone for an ultrasound earlier that day, so I knew it wasn't really good. And my husband went out drinking that night, and I was alone by myself, having to, put my son down and, spend time with him, of course, but it was hard. I felt really alone at times. And, in hindsight, I don't blame him. It was a lot. And, that was his way of, escaping, but I needed him. But at the same time, that's what he needed. Yeah. But we got into a huge argument because it was like, I miscarried and you're out drinking. The whole process was hard on both of us in very different ways.
It's like when you have different expectations of how to cope and how to regulate yourself after what has just happened. There's a big difference in how we are raised, how we actually cope with things. And I love that you work with couples. I love that you focus on the holistic approach of fertility or infertility as such. Please tell us a bit more about what a couple could expect when they want to work with you. How do you work?
Yeah. Well, when I work one-on-one with clients, it's very much tailored to what they need. But oftentimes I find the first thing that we need to work on is what I like to call their big rocks. And basically those are the blocks that they're working with. Obviously, the medical piece of it is one, but there's oftentimes other pieces, whether it be connection with your partner, which is oftentimes there. Even the best of couples suffer from this, right? Because it's just hard. There's no handbook, and we work on those big rocks. Once we've worked on the big rocks, we then go ahead and, do a deep dive into their medical history to date, including any cycles, miscarriages that they've had. Then from there, we will come up with an action plan. Okay, first we're going to go find a new doctor, then we're going to go have this testing done, blah, blah, blah. Then after that, we are going to make sure that the team that you have, the doctors that you're working with, are the right ones in place. And then only then can we ensure that your next cycle is your best cycle. So it's a very systematic process. I call it, my enrich your fertility method, my patented, method of how I go through it, because that is, really ultimately what helped me, and, continues to help others. And, I'm working with a couple who had issues that were never uncovered. She has an immune condition, a thyroid problem, and I don't even know what else. And it was just so blatant. And the doctors, when she came to me on that, when we met for that first session, she was crying. She said, the doctor told me I was broken and it was all my fault. Oh. So this is what's happening. Because 1 in 8 couples suffer, and I'm sure it's very similar, over on your side as well, and I think it's even higher. And I think with COVID, I think it's going to be even higher. It's it's really difficult. And I should say I work with women all over the world. I do work with women, in Europe, in Canada, all over the place. And obviously the healthcare system is different. And sometimes that can be better and sometimes that can be worse. You know, and it's very hard. I think working, with a healthcare system who tells you can't even go to the doctor until, you've been trying for X amount of time, which can be hard because if there is a pre-existing condition, you shouldn't wait that long. But I know that unfortunately sometimes healthcare, dictates that. But, this couple like uncovered something and the husband was so angry. He's like, why does nobody look into this? And I said, because there's so many infertile couples, X amount of clinics all over the world. And doctors are, they don't have the time to sit with you. And, I even say during my time, I finally found a doctor who I loved, who listened to me. And I had a therapist who had known me forever, but I still was missing something. I was still missing that me, right? That person who is there to tell you you're not being crazy. Yesterday, another client, I work on Voxer, just needed to vent because when we're not meeting on Zoom, they have access to me that way. And she needed a pick me up. She was like, I need a pick me up. This is what's going on. We need to know that our emotions are normal. And I, share stories because I want everybody to know that it's normal. I want everybody to know that despite the fact that I eventually had a natural pregnancy, to this day, it's still triggering for me to see a pregnant woman because I assume in my mind, well, I don't anymore, but I used to assume that she didn't have any trouble getting pregnant. And the truth is, everybody has trouble with pregnancy in one way, whether it's getting pregnant, whether it's during your pregnancy, or whether it's postpartum. Pregnancy is not easy.
But I don't know where it comes from that this is the easiest thing and that women need to be able to do it just like that. And that it's like big majority of the responsibility on the woman. I don't know where that comes from. It's totally ridiculous. No. We need to be able to do it all. I don't even know how you maintain to have a job while you are on IVF cycle treatment. Like, how do you even do that? There's so much.
It's very hard. And oftentimes, if somebody feels comfortable, I encourage them to talk to their manager about what they're going through, because you could, at the drop of the hat, be called in, to have a retrieval with it, you could have a plan, but it all changes. Like, you have to fly by the seat of your pants. And for some of us, it's really hard to do. And then to add a job on top of it, it's very stressful. So if somebody feels comfortable, I do recommend that they speak to their manager about it. I think fortunately there have been some good things that have happened from COVID. I think a lot of people have a more flexible schedule right now. So I think that that's good. But, there's just so much going on by the way of misinformation, even, with what's going on in the world today. Like, there's so many things that are making infertility even harder, and so much guilt and shame put on us by doctors and medical companies. And it's very hard.
I cannot comprehend that. I'm a registered nurse. And when I just think of a doctor or another health professional talking to a patient like that, or anyone who is seeking out for help, it is incomprehensible to me.
It happens all the time. It happened to me too. I sat with my high risk doctor after I, lost my son, my second son, and my daughter was born. And he told me it was my body's fault that I went into labor early and everything that happened, and that I should never, ever get pregnant again because I won't be able to carry it, that I should find a surrogate. And, the egg's on his face because I carried a baby to 36 weeks after that. Natural pregnancy. So I don't think anybody should ever speak to a woman in that way. And I've heard it from women. women doctors. I've heard it from male doctors. It's terrible. It's really terrible, because I think at the end of the day, the empathy still needs to be there. And I did a post yesterday, and as a reminder that unless your nurse or doctor has been in your shoes, do not let them tell you they understand what it feels like to be in your shoes. And I give you permission to tell them to, stick their opinion.
Yeah.
It's just, and here's the other thing too, that even if you do know somebody who's been through it, their situation might be different. We each will go through it and feel it very differently. And we need to hold space for each other. And I think as women, I think we've gotten better about being, non-judgmental, but we still have a ways to go. Yeah. And that's what I try to do. Like in my community, I have a Facebook community, and it's everybody, there's no shame. And we don't shame anybody about any question or anything that they do, because this is a very personal thing. And that everybody has to do what's right for them. And I don't allow any of that at all to happen. It's just, we have to support and love on each other regardless.
Yeah. What would you, from your experience and your own personal one, but also from the one that you have now working with couples and women, if there are people out there who don't really know what to say to someone who is undergoing this or who had a miscarriage, some people just don't have the feel of what is appropriate to say or what is actually helpful, and then many people just don't do anything, and then it's like leaving the couple and the woman alone because I cannot deal with this. But what would you say is like a recommendation for all of those out there that would like to help but just don't know how or what to say?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, and I love that you asked that, because really you hit the nail on the head. You should never say I understand what you're going through, and you should never not ask.
Yeah.
The right thing to say is, what can I do? What happened? Talk to me. I'm here for you. When you're ready to talk, I'm here for you, and I'm a good listener, and I will listen, and whatever it is that you need, I will do. And to take it a step further, trying to get this person out of, bring them some joy, even for an hour, take them to the movies, take them to get makeovers, take them to the mall, something, take them out to dinner or drinks, something. But be empathetic. But being empathetic in this particular situation is asking questions, not pretending that you understand. And just saying, listen, I don't know what to say. It's okay to say that. I don't know what to say. I just want you to know I love you and I'm here for you. That's the best thing that you can do for somebody going through this situation, because you just can't, different situation altogether. But I had a friend, a very dear friend, and she knows I talk about this all the time. And this was, after I lost my son, she came, her and my two other besties came to the hospital and just listened to me talk. And they just started crying, and they just listened to me talk. And one of them came back one day as my daughter was in the NICU. And again, I had this younger child. I was going back and forth an hour to see my baby in the hospital, and then eventually, breastfeed and all that. She just showed up one day, and I was like, I don't feel comfortable. Like my baby was so small, people would freak out. So I didn't really want anybody coming to see her. And she looks at me and she goes, Caryn, I just wanted to come here and hold your hand. And it was so powerful, because that's exactly what I needed. And she just showed up out of nowhere just to hold my hand. Took time out of her day to do that. So it doesn't need to be this grand gesture. Somebody just needs to know that somebody cares.
Yeah, I love that. that will help so many out there. First of all, how brave you are sharing your story and being so vulnerable with what has happened to you, but then how inspiring that is for, you know, the emotional, spiritual, mental state and physical state that you are sitting here after everything you've been through. There is hope out there for women who undergo a similar situation. And I love that you use all of that combined to help them now. Where can they find you? How can people find you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a website and it's spelled just like my name, carynrich.com, Caryn rich.com. I've got a whole bunch of blog posts on there that cover a lot of different topics. I've got great freebies on there for all kinds of different things, but also you can book a session just to talk and see if fertility coaching is for you on there. I'm also really active on Instagram and I answer my DMs. I also answer my emails, and you can get my email address through my website, but I like to be the one to do that, not my assistant. So on Instagram, same thing. I'm at Caryn Rich, Carynrich, and I'm very active on there. And I also have a Facebook group, and anybody who would love to come join, it is a non-judgmental, supportive place for us to come and to share information, but also to get away a little bit, to find out how we can, overcome these things. And that is, you can go to carynrich.com/FB group, and that'll take you directly to the group. So it's my mission, and it lights me on fire to help women in this manner and couples.
Yeah, I can really feel it. I will put all your links in the caption of this episode. And guys, if you like this episode, share it with anyone you think needs to hear Caryn's inspiring story. Infertility occurs much more often than we think, and it has nothing to do with how capable you are as a woman, how capable your body is. It's a very difficult thing to get pregnant. I mean, when you just understand all the things that need to align in your body to make this baby, it is no surprise that there are delays in conceiving, but it is possible. And I loved, Caryn, that you shared your story. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and for doing what you do. You've got such a lovely way about you. So thank you for all you do. And I can't wait to go binge all the rest of your episodes. So thank you.
Guys, if you like this episode, give me a like and a review. And also make sure that you subscribe to this podcast for more inspiring stories to come. Until next time at Raw and Real with Stefanie Fernandes. Bye now.